Welcome, everyone. I am so excited about this panel. I'm going to let Steve Adari, who's our fabulous moderator, who's back for year 4. He's been with us since the kickoff of AI Showbiz Summit 4.0, and he's still smiling. That's awesome. But he is our merchant of light, a very talented individual. And if you're fortunate enough to work with him, you would know firsthand what I'm talking about, and a huge supporter of our event. I'm going to turn it over to you, Steve, to do the introductions, and take it away, Steve.
Thank you, Molly, for the very cordial introduction. So as Molly stated, this is actually an encore performance from the live session we did last year. Same title with different people, with the exception of RAFFAELLA. She was on the panel last year when we did this live. And when Molly reached out to me to say it was so fabulous, let's do an encore, and let's do it virtual like we're doing here. So to kick things off, I wanted to start with 30-second self-intros, and I'll lead it off myself. So as Molly said, I'm Steve Adari. I have been advising startups for 25 years, the last 7 in AI, something like 22, 23 AI startups. And then most recently, I kicked off, rather than just being an advisor, I said, well, you know, it's time to do my own startup, which is Signal Action AI. Which I'm presenting at Pitch Fest later. So, RAFFAELLA, over to you, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. RAFFAELLA Camera, coming to you from Los Angeles, from Santa Monica to be exact. I am the Global Head of Innovation and Strategy for Accenture XR. XR for us is anything that is AR, VR, or mixed reality. We have hundreds of practitioners worldwide. We believe that XR, together with quantum computing and distributed ledger technologies, is one of the emerging technologies that our clients need to adopt in order to be able to compete in the post-digital era. So we started the practice 3 years ago and invested time and money of our own to make sure that we can be at the forefront and help guide our clients be first movers and leaders in this space.
Thank you. Thank you. So over to Brian Malilovic, very amusing, DOLAN. That's well done. Well done, Brian. Please introduce yourself.
I am Brian Malilovic DOLAN. I found out that being Malilovic, it's a little bit like being John Malkovich, and I'm just enjoying it a lot. So I didn't want to give up on that opportunity. So I'm a mathematician and cyberneticist. I've been building mathematical and AI products for about 25 years. I've built over 3,000 AI products in my career. Some for MySpace, some for the CIA, some for Yahoo, some for EMC. And I have a studio now that builds companies based around mathematical products.
Terrific. Thank you very much. And Emily, we're over to you, please.
Emily K. Zelton, or EKD. First and foremost, I'm essentially just a writer. Just writing about my educational background, I guess, essentially made me an environmental sociologist, i.e. I study human nature. So I'm just writing about what it's like to be in the digital age and all of those things related to that on the population level and how it affects it. As well as I recently co-authored a sci-fi novel with another great mind just like y'all. And it's called Air Trap, and it concerns the brain-computer interface.
Right, and that book is coming out next, Emily. Is that right? Soon, or do you have a date on that?
There's no day, you know, like.
Okay. All right. Great. Okay, so we did prep, and I'm not going to put off the slides. I have roughly about 7 questions. This was geared for roughly 6 minutes, but we have a smaller panel, but that means we can go deeper and more people can have more time for each topic. So I want to start off with question number 1, which is kind of broad-based, and then we'll go on from there. But the first question is, what excites you most on how emotion AI, conversational AI, sensors, IoT, ambient intelligence will expand the limits of human perception to create more dynamic consumer experiences? And in the discussion, give us give us a compelling customer use case in your answer. Who wants to lead off?
I can start if you want.
Thank you.
Anyone? I would say that when we look at consumers and when we look at what we call the traditional digital journey, so digitally, usually a consumer goes from web to mobile. We want to make sure that we start expanding and lengthening that digital journey to account for other technologies that can help create a deeper relationship with the customer. That is AR, VR, or possibly even mixed reality glasses. And we've done some work with all that. When you start talking about, obviously adding AI, being able to detect behaviors or feelings that customers might want, well, then you can hopefully give consumers back something that they're looking for, that is to be embedded in an experience, so immersed in an experience. They also want to be able to interact or manipulate products and things, and they want to be able to get individualized results and results that are for them and for what they're interested in. So there are a variety of different ways of doing this, from a little bit more backhand, and if you're doing consumer research, can you now do it using behavioral data that you can get from these specific headsets, and to that attach even AI so that you can give them back what they're really looking for. So that's a conjunction of AI and XR.
So the use case that you cited, if I recall correctly, RAFFAELLA, last year was in retail for like stocking shelves and in terms of the visibility, or do I have that right? Or
yeah, it was mostly when you do any form of consumer or customer research, you want to try to figure out where they really want to see things and where they respond better to positioning of either an entire flow of a specific physical space, or where things are placed, or even how things are presented. So that's one way, and that's what we were looking at, and that's what we are expanding in general when it comes to research and analysis.
Okay, great. You must have. Let's cut over to Brian. With all the work that you've done, you have a whole, cornucopia of use cases that range from science projects to defense to whatever. So I'm curious about what excites you most in this space, Brian.
I mean, I'm an enthusiast, right? But putting aside the consumer aspect for just a second, I think what I'm really excited about the emotional AI, which is one of the first things you mentioned, and the other forms of sort of cognitive psychology within artificial intelligence, is how interesting it is to watch us fail at it. And you learn so much about how we perceive what intelligence is, right? And so when we try to there's this movie called Sunspring where the AI wrote the script, and it was a disaster, but it was an amazingly insightful disaster. So I think as we try to move into emotional AI, we're learning kind of from video games, because video games are trying to create this emotional arc and create these emotional characters. We're trying to get the AI to kind of have that emotion itself. It's funny to watch it crack, but it's not only funny, it's really educational to see like what dimensions of communication do you have to have an emotional communication go back and forth, right? Like, what does it have to know for it to be emotional? And we know that people will like talk to chatbots late at night and tell them their deepest, darkest secrets. So they're having this one-way emotional communication with these chatbots that is purely a personal experience. Watching that try to become a two-way experience and learning from ourselves and what we think of as a two-way emotional experience might be, that's what's really interesting to me. So I'm very much looking forward to the flameouts that are going to come along, like Microsoft K, total flameout, right? But it was fascinating flameout. I would totally do that again. Well, I didn't do it, but like I would do that myself. So those are the experiences that are pretty exciting to me.
Yeah, and I like how you really picked up. I've been a real advocate for emotion AI. Well, I advise startups in the emotion AI space, and what we're really seeing next, and I'll be talking about this. We actually have a follow-up slide that will allow us to go a little deeper on it, but I just want to put it on the table here. Is look out for emotion synthesis, where you can do real-time synthesis based on a two-way conversation rather than just kind of a narrow conversation with a chatbot. It's a real exciting area. We'll pick up on that further. But Emily, what excites you most in this space besides writing the sci-fi novels? Go ahead.
So honestly, it's very awesome to think of the flops. I do like that. Because, well, not to frame tech people as unfeeling or something, but, let's say that's an archetype of some sort. So to think about these type of people, I don't understand, says Brian. To think about these kind of people trying to help us become more, these type of people creating this technology, and this technology is going to enable us to be more human, is highly ironic. That tech will show us how to be more immersed in the human experience.
So I'm just going to have to ask you this because I've been curious about it. So where does is this part of the e-waste exhaust that you're alluding to? Is that where it fits?
Well, what will we do with the emotional AI technology when it's done? Yes, I forgot to touch on that earlier. Since there's not as many people, I'm also an electronic waste management subject matter expert. So I look at obsolescence, and I coined a term called digital dissonance that Steve really enjoys. And it's about how we have this collective level of disconnect or whatever, despite the paradoxical nature of technology supposed to connect us. But, here we are, and I have my phone in front of my face, and I don't have to talk to you.
Right. So the digital dissonance really plays off of cognitive dissonance, which is pervasive out there in the world.
It's also contemporary escapism, kind of, but that's just something I've been ranting.
We can get into some philosophy, Nietzsche. Well, no, not for this discussion here. So great. So let's open up a little bit further on this ties to the first question, but specifically, and this is really, I guess, where we can talk about the use cases. We kind of talked around the use cases. But which verticals excite you most to manifest this superior customer experience that you all alluded to? And is the CX really the real edge for competitive differentiation? And I have up there, besides, entertainment, which is a big part of this event, telemedicine and healthcare. Wow, that is just sizzling, and that's what Signal Action AI is all about. But there's also, immersive journalism, virtual travel, training, and virtual events like what we're doing. So, Brian, go ahead and kick us off.
So, in terms of verticals, being a guy with a very short attention span, I think there are two quick answers. I'll try to be quick. The first one is, from an impact point of view, I've been really delighted to have been working in digital health for the last several years and doing things that actually make people better. And when you hear back that something you did contributed, down the line, somebody got better because of something that you helped to work on is the most exciting thing. And I won't go into the details there because it's boring, but I feel very good at the end of the day that when I come home and I say, yeah, what I did helped get, some teenagers into a heart study that they need to be into. That is one level of excitement, is significance. They say that, meaningful work is one of the things that drives people's happiness. And I feel like I get that when I work in digital health. But on the pure curiosity point of view, I'm a mathematician, so I like to just tinker. And I'm very interested in this notion of computational psychology and artificial personality. And I think the best way to experiment with that is in video games, actually, and with virtual reality, because it creates a comprehensive experience. So that is the most fun thing to play with right now. I'm also trying to incorporate some quantum into that, but I'm not doing a very good job. It's the most fun thing. I kind of suck at that. It's the most fun thing to play with, but the most satisfying thing is the digital health for me.
Yeah, I agree with that. And that's really part of, the social AI for good, and, where there's a big empathetic component to it. And, just right now in the pandemic, the frontline workers, oh my gosh, that, you just, what they're putting out for that exact cause is really commendable. RAFFAELLA, over to you, please. What excites you most in which verticals? Yeah.
I think all of them are incredibly interesting. All of them, even more so now, are what any client and any organization is really looking for. Some are a little bit further ahead than others, but I think that's where we're heading in general. If you pick one or two, virtual training for sure. I think that the way that we're going to be, that we will be learning in the future, even now in the future, that could be technical training. It could be being able to perform a task without having help right next to you, or without having to refer back to a manual, or behavioral training. That could be, how do I respond to a certain situation? You can go the psychological route, and so the medical route. You can go, a sales route. How do I respond to a specific customer? Those are things that done in XR, sometimes in mixed reality, for technical seems to work better, or in VR, you see an increase in speed of learning and retention of that specific information that is exponential, up to 70%. So I think we will see more and more of that, not to mention that it becomes cheaper in a way to teach that way, or at least to supplement teaching with this way of doing things. You can reduce the errors, you can reduce the amount of time that it takes to do certain things, you can recreate environments that could be difficult to reach or dangerous. If you're thinking about training someone how to do maintenance at a nuclear plant, you're trying not to send people in there. As much as you possibly can, or at least to send less people there. So how much of that can you do remotely? Same thing if, for example, you're trying to make sure that the power lines are all working properly, so that you can make sure that there are no fires. Coming up here in Southern California, that happens all the time. We did a project for Sempra, and we built the initial part of the learning system in VR, and they can do that in their own classroom with a VR headset on, without having to travel to the location, find those exact spots, and then travel back. That could take possibly even an entire day versus 20 minutes. So those are some of the things that are, I think, very
well said. And the one, a call out both, peel back to Brian and yourself. There's a company called Neuro Rehab VR in Dallas, Venus on Ready. I've done some panels with her before. Basically, she's applying VR for betterment of disabled, physically or mentally. And the success stories are really, really scintillating. And you're absolutely right on the money regarding that type of genre, to be able to, to get on the road to betterment. And she has some really wonderful success stories. So, she started in hospitals and clinics. Now she's rolling out even to assisted living facilities. And there's a lot, so with early stage dementia and Alzheimer's, another tremendous use case, for addressing that as well. Yeah. Emily, what excites you most in the vertical?
I already came up with like a controversial, not controversial. I was like, I have an annoying question, but I'll say what I'm excited about most would be immersive journalism, just because simply I think that could literally save academia. Because if you think about it, research, academics are great, yes, whatever. But there is a time where I feel there is a disconnect with the general public. They don't do research that resonates, or they don't talk in a language we all understand. Let me see. And so if someone could just immerse themselves, maybe in a fictional context or whatever, what it's like to be in a underserved population or something, there won't have to be funding that goes into why does this group suffer more because they have less privilege? Because that's literally, I see so much funding go into that. And I'm like, because of power dynamics, right? But they're just like, people can't get around that cognitive dissonance, yes. So if they could step into someone's shoes just for a moment, maybe they wouldn't need years of education over it.
Right, and there's a couple of takeaways from the immersive journalism there, is that in many respects, immersive journalism could be the new form of investigative journalism. And also, you really have more objectivity to try to navigate on your own accord, rather than just getting polarized with all the biases that you're presented with in mainstream journalism, which is a cesspool. Skewed on one side more so than the other, but it's an interesting angle. And there are, I don't know what the demographics are, but there is a populace of people. We have to still do it the old-fashioned way, which takes a lot of time and work, and a lot of people don't want to put in the time and work to kind of really learn what these uses are. before they spew off on some kind of, comment on Twitter or Facebook or something like that. So good. That's really good. So
did any of you guys have
Brian,
an opportunity to try? There's a filmmaker named Inaritu something. He was a cinematographer for Gravity, and I didn't check this out, but he did a virtual reality experience at the LA County Museum of Art about the immigration experience that I heard was amazing. And apparently, you are crossing the Rio in virtual reality. I didn't get to experience that. I heard about it just after it was gone. Did anybody get?
Actually, there's a great.
That was called Carne y Arena.
That's right.
Trademark this idea at this panel.
And it won the first Oscar for VR.
Very nice. Very nice.
Did you get to try it, RAFFAELLA?
Huh? No, I signed up for it. There was a long line, and I sent my email and everything, and I never heard back.
Even with your stature, that didn't get you in, RAFFAELLA, right? That's great. That's great. Well, we're really, so the next question is really more comments on a kind of an interesting post by Rushkoff on how addictive text exploits our evolutionary needs. And where he talks about the goal is to generate behavioral change and habit formation, most often without the user's knowledge or consent. And we know how much that happens through the big players, Google, Facebook, etc., right? And then the behavior design theory holds that people don't change their behaviors because of shifts in their attitudes and opinions. They actually change their attitudes to match their behaviors. And in this model, we are more like machines than thinking more machine thinking than autonomous beings, which kind of peels back to some of the stuff that you were talking about, Brian. So addictive tech now, for sure in games and AR, but what are your thoughts on this behavioral change, habit formation genre? I'm curious. Who wants to kick it off?
Emily, go ahead and kick it off. I have lots of thoughts on this, so somebody else should say something before I run my mouth.
Okay.
Annoying question from earlier. I was just going to be like, is digital health and telehealth the same thing? But anyway, real points to make. This behavior design theory, what? Because there's actually a theory in environmental science, it's called, or environmental sociology, it's called the A-B split, attitude behavior split. Why do I post about recycling, but why don't I recycle? So that phenomena comes under fire for me immediately. Also, let me see. Maybe that's it. I'll come back to it. Sorry, that one set me off.
But what about this shit as far as, people changing their attitudes to match the behavior? There's an interesting interplay there.
I got it. So a whole generation has been fundamentally rewired by using digital media, actually.
Right.
So to argue that predictive text couldn't do that, like literally the whole people born into all the internets and such, literally our brains are wired differently than the generation beforehand. Says IBM.
And they're being rewired by more of, depending on, what your behaviors and your habit formations are. There is this, it goes to, brain plasticity, and the more you push it, the more, the neuronal pathways and connections, and then the whole interplay between the cortex and, the, amygdala and, our emotions and, Brian, what, how does this play into some of the work that you're doing?
So we had, first of all, this sort of addictive technology. I was the director of research at MySpace back in like 2006-07. So that's where the notion of hyper-targeting was invented. It wasn't invented by me, but I was on the team. It was invented by my boss. And so I've long come to regret sort of some of that work. It was very interesting math. We had a ton of Rupert Murdoch's money, and we had a ton of data, and we got to do a lot of math, and it was a lot of fun. But it became pretty clear to us that we were able to influence behaviors. In Flash, fast forward about 12 years or something, and I'm working with a physician out of Cedars-Sinai who does therapy, virtual reality therapy, And we're talking about this notion of embodiment therapy. And while we're getting into this health and wellness, like using virtual reality to bring people back from addiction, you look into addiction programs, and the one addiction program that is the most effective is Alcoholics Anonymous. And their key statement is, I cannot think my way into better acting, but I can act my way into better thinking, which is the inverse of exactly what's happening. Exactly. You were just saying, they're seeing.
So that's a great proof. I'm glad you brought that up. That's an excellent proof positive of exactly the contention in this. Yeah.
If you want the data, I mean, I like to think theory then data, but if you want the data, AA really shows you exactly what goes on. You have to act and then monitor your thinking. And if your action is to absorb anything that was said on Twitter, then that's where your thinking will go. And so your statement to kick this off is, right in line with that.
Yeah, but the downside to it is that they almost turn you into a quasi-automaton because of the program, and they're very
were you ever not?
Right?
I mean, like, that's the big question. Like, were you ever not an automaton?
Oh my God!
That's good meta. RAFFAELLA, how do you weigh in on this?
I would just say that we learn through repetition. That's usually how we learn. And it's really difficult that's why I think it's very difficult to learn by reading something or just by listening to something. You have to repeat the action, and that could be a simple action like learning how to open a bottle, but it could also be something a little bit more psychological oriented, which is how to get over a trauma. I think that the entire world has been striving to try to figure out how to more quickly teach people how to be happier by having better types of behaviors and taking better actions. I think what XR can do, and I'm looking at the positive, is allowing you to repeat a certain action quickly and so many times that you can learn that behavior and it becomes ingrained in you without having to mentally translate what is being told to you or what you're reading or what's being taught in a different way, understanding it and doing it. So it goes straight to the core of what it is that you're trying to do, and it gets impressed into you. So
so it's more experiential, which is the best form of learning. That is what you're alluding to.
Correct, but it goes across all the spectrum of any form of learning that could be for
That's right. It's like a superset of sorts.
For your own psychological betterment, but it could also be because you're trying to learn a skill of some kind. So in that sense, I think it's fantastic. And then yes, if you make people repeat something, then you also change their behavior because they will learn to do it in a different way and they will think about it.
Yeah, and exactly, and it's really great because, it really kind of, gears it to the, the individual. So if you have, high intensity for experiential learning, you can accelerate and learn a whole lot faster. So as a lifelong learner from, the old school ways, but still, that's the first thing I do every is digest information for like the first 2 hours of the day. But and it's like working out and eating right. You just get into a groove where you just love to do it. So, but I think this is an accelerator of sorts, and I like the comment. So my next question, because it's just such big news, is comments on Magic Leap's 2.6 billion bait and switch. So I mean, for those that are not as everybody's familiar with it, but I mean. So over the years, they raised 2.6 billion, and these were marquee investors: Andreessen Horowitz, Kleiner Perkins, Google itself, not Google Ventures, and many more. Wow! So these are supposed to be the movers and shakers, in the business. The CEO, Sundar Pichai, joined the Magic Leap board. And I mean, it's a VC job to rave about their portfolio companies, but I don't see any of the investors raving about this. So how and why could they raise from these purported experts $2.6 billion and then lay off half their employees with hardly releasing anything at all in 7 years? Brian, you want to kick it off?
Okay, I'll try to be quick again. So there's this great book that came out about oh God, 15 years ago called The Wisdom of Crowds. And if you're a statistician or have, background in biomathematics or something, this book was completely unsurprising, right? You're like, yeah, okay, independent variables, whatever. What that book does not, what the book basically says is that you can ask a lot of people, and if you ask a lot of people and average their opinions, you're going to get the correct prediction. But the book was assuming that all these opinions of people were relatively independent, right? And that's just the law of large numbers. It's actually a central limit theorem, as if you want to take it a little bit further. But when you get into venture capital, there's no independence, right? It's a strongly correlated set of thinking. And,
bingo.
right?
I think it's called the herd mentality or something like that. The
herd mentality, and it's a very interesting statistical phenomenon. I built a little AI environment where I was trying to replicate it using Conway's voids and life. But anyway, so like buzzwords, and one of the reasons I reacted so strongly is I'm in artificial intelligence. I've been here, for 25 years, and I've seen two winters because of people going, "Hey, expert systems are going to automate everything," and then guess what, And now we're going through the deep learning one. I'm like, oh, come on, guys, like you're going to drive us to another winter. Everybody's going to back off AI. And I just feel like we're so on the tip of that. Like just, tone down the claims. We won't, but even big investors like that are going to get caught into this, this dynamical system, this strange attractor of buzzwords and push towards these technologies that aren't ready, that are overhyped. AI gets it all the time, and I'm not looking forward to the next one. So it was personally hurtful to me when this happened. I mean, there's a little bit of schadenfreude. You're like, of course they were.
Right. So it opens, versus, yeah, but here's the story that, when I get, my portfolio of AI startups, over the past few years, and it's not meant to be demeaning, but, I think the bloom's off Silicon Valley VC. I mean, it's too clubby. And there's too many inflated egos on what they really think they know. And when these cheapens can get smoked, on a deal like this, it really kind of shows the human foibles and frailty. I mean, no one's infallible, and bam. So, Emily, your thoughts on the Magic Leap debacle?
So basically, oops, not enough pre-context on this, but it basically sounds like a Theranos situation, right?
Yes, that's right.
Well, the magic of words and belief is, and groupthink, that can drive anything. Yes, of course, they call like electronics are irresistible, right? That's something that perpetuates the obsolescence and how fast it moves. You always want the newest, bestest model of something.
Right.
You're always chasing that. Can you blame them? Yes, of course. But
right.
They're probably not the great. Well, whatever. I'm not investing yet, but let me see. It's all about reverse rhetoric, honestly, and the manipulation of language.
Well, yeah, and perception has to be thrown in there. I mean, false perception in this case here, and they had so much. The hype was just so ginormous that no one expected something like this, and it was really kind of slickly disguised, in some respects. RAFFAELLA, what are your thoughts on it? Did you have any Magic Leap projects at Accenture?
We did in the past.
Yeah.
And we might still. I'm not working on any myself personally. I'll stay away from why the investors invested the way they did, and because that would be, it would be a personal opinion and maybe even a little bit of second guessing. Yeah. I would say that it seems to me like they tried to do too much. They did not concentrate enough on building one thing and going for some specific solutions. I thought it was interesting that they were trying to go after the consumer market with a product that seemed to be priced and built more for enterprise than for consumers. So I think that what they're doing now is good in the sense because they're concentrating more and they're doing that. I also think that if this happened even just a year and a half ago, it would have hit the market much worse from an XR perspective, because I think that there were the Quest wasn't yet that popular, the HoloLens wasn't yet the product that it is, and I think it would have dragged down the rest of the market more.
Right. Good point.
Happening now, I think it's manageable. Investors, that's their own thing, but I don't think it drags down the rest, the view of the XR space like it could have a few years ago.
Right. So you wanted to come back with a point, Emily?
Oh, well, I just wanted to, and if you ever remember, Gardner created the hype cycle. So that's one thing.
Yes.
Can't run from where you come from.
They're annoying. I know. I look at them, and I don't really spend much time because they're too annoying to me. Yeah.
Started as Y2K compliance. But anyway, and then the CE industry is just always up to this kind of stuff, is honestly all I have to say.
Right.
Well,
Brian, you wanted to chime in?
Yeah, so Steve, not to presume on your, probably 22, 23 years of life, but you may remember the Segway hype, right? Like, you remember this back when, what was it?
Yeah,
I don't even remember. Like,
that's a good one. I forgot about that. Yeah.
Yeah, like, oh my God, they're going to build cities around this thing. And
Right.
Right? You're like, Jesus, come on. Oh, sorry, Emily. But like, I remember that. So, because I'm old and cranky, I went through it so many times. So when I started hearing about Magic Leap, I'm like, that smells familiar,
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's historic. Yeah. So let's move on. Here's the loaded one that we can spend a lot of time, but we've got, I don't know, about 15 minutes, I think. So the next question is, and it ties back a little bit to the introduction, but on the emotion, but will real-time emotional give and robot self-expression, and in conjunction with AR and XR, spark mirror world? So for those of you, that are not familiar with Mirror World, so Mirror World was popularized in the early 90s. This is a book by Yale computer scientist David Galintner. And the contention there was, the mirror worlds that are being creating, it will give you greater context, meaning, function, 3D photorealistic, virtual avatars with microexpression, greater self-expression. So when it was written, of course, before the internet, really, there are enabling technologies like MOSHE, in disclosure, I'm an advisor to them, but they actually have an EPU, which stands for Emotional Processing Engine, and they can synthesize emotional levels in real time with responses using psychometric functions without, pre-programmed set of inputs. So, and there's this fusion again, of the real time, will this help spark mirror world, both for games, simulation, learning, AR, VR. So it's kind of loaded and expansive. Who wants to jump in first with their thoughts?
Brian. That was a quick toward you. A little more context I need a little context on mirror worlds, but I think I get it.
Oh yeah? Okay, good. I'm glad you're familiar with it. Yeah. Ryan,
I think I get it. Just a little more context.
Okay.
I think that one of the things that's really interesting about the emotional AI and these emotional processing systems as being viewing them as some sort of catalyst is the presumption in there that it hasn't happened before. And it has happened before. I mean, you think about like a good novel, and not that anybody here cares about those, but like you take a good novel and it is emotions in a container that are being delivered from one person across time and space, right? So like it is the emotional catalyst. You can create a whole inner world just with a novel, and that's since the printing press, right? And that was one of the things that the printing press was seen as being dangerous. So, will Mirror World come about? It probably already exists in a small form in that way, because we're already sort of thinking of our experiences being something outside of ourselves and being driven by something else, by our novels, from the simplest tech to our AR. So it will come about. I mean, we're going to cling on to this notion that our internal monologue and our internal world is somehow more real than anything we're observing in these digital creatures. And maybe that's true. Maybe it's not. I can't measure it. I don't know. But I don't think that, there's any doubt that we're going to see the world as more and more integrated like that. But people will still have this sense of personhood, this sense of entitlement, a human cognitive entitlement that will prevent it from really ever completely happening.
Right. No, I like your, and I agree with that. It's there's got to be delimiters around it. Emily, since you said you got the concept here grounded.
Thanks. So, are we talking about basically avatars or digital doppelgangers in like an alternate reality and subsisting within it? Okay, yeah, that's what I got from that. I literally have never heard of
Okay.
And it's
well, the book was written before you were born, so that's
maybe,
understandable.
I'm not going to disclose my birthday, but
okay, that's all right. That's all right.
But it's an alternate reality, and then also they do some sort of biometric tracing of your emotions and such.
I think that could,
that was
could
something
be
that was mentioned earlier.
Tie-in. Yeah.
I just heard that mentioned earlier. But do I think there'll be alternate realities that people escape into? I mean, they already exist.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean, gaming's gone up.
I mean, really,
like
it is,
right?
Yeah. So, but in terms of not in the mirror world, just rather than just being in a gameplay, it's more exploratory. My understanding of mirror worlds, where you have more latitude in terms of getting out of it what you want, how much you want to get out of it, how much you put in. It's really more. It's not levels of gaming. It's really more open ended. Which is kind of escapism. It is. It's kind of a form of escapism in some respects. RAFFAELLA, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think the mirror world or the spatial world is, at least for us who work in XR, is the holy grail. That's what we're trying to figure out. What is it? What is it?
Is that really the holy grail? That's interesting, though, the way you're phrasing it then. Is that one of the holy grail objectives of coming out of XR?
Well, I think so, because I know we often talk about devices and, different form factors and where that is going to go. At the end of the day, what we're getting to is a new level. Basically, where is digital going to be going, and how what's the next rendition of digital, which is not just the glasses or the VR headset, but it's really how are you going to interact with now a world that is spatially enabled, meaning that depending on where you might be looking, what you might be wearing, how you're responding to certain things, what you did prior, and what action you're performing, you might have a different app or action that you might be able to make. You might have different information that you're able to connect with. I think, if I can speak for everyone, I think that's one of the things that is most exciting for all of us, because we really need to try to, go back to what happened in the past, extrapolate from there, but then layer on top, based on what we know right now and the different players in the ecosystem, what part they might own of that and what might come out of that. We will get only this close to what that is really going to be, but I think we are all already trying to create a vision for it. I know we are, and that will keep on moving, and even try to quantify quantify and qualify what that would be. And the different players and the different strategic ecosystem players, from the Microsoft to the Facebook to all the other ones, they are building pieces of solutions to enable the spatial world. So it's not this magical thing, but it's something that's already being built piece by piece.
That's right. And to ground it, it isn't just It's going to be kind of this shared building blocks that can be strung together in some way, shape, or form. So I wanted to leave some time for questions, but I do have one more question because it's very apropos, or perhaps two questions. But the next question is, will COVID speed up the use of robots to replace human workers? It's already changing consumer preferences, and it's definitely opening up accelerated opportunities in automation or hyper automation with augmented intelligence and AI. I also advise in this space. So what are your thoughts on this? Is this an accelerator to have more, automation, AI, augmented intelligence for the future of work?
I would say yes, absolutely yes. I think COVID has, in a way, accelerated the adoption of any form of remote solution, so to speak, and XR falls within that. So anything that we were looking at before that we were saying, look, this could be the ROI, you could do it faster and cheaper. Well, now it's faster and cheaper. And by the way, you need to do it that way because you cannot reach certain locations now. Even if you wanted to, even if you could do it before, now you really cannot do it. In addition, I think even to solve for COVID itself, or the virus itself, XR, for example, has been used to do some of those things. So we did something with the HoloLens to teach, I think in the UK, I think it was to build and manufacture respirators faster. Went a lot faster just by being able to have a solution that you could see, and then the workers could do it faster because.
Oh, that's terrific. That's an excellent use case. Yeah, because of all the problems in production of that. So you have the hard ROI on the acceleration of producing the ventilators. Yeah, great. Emily?
So in regards to the last question and this question, just like kind of my thoughts on that. If a mirror world is supposed to be a utopia of some sort, which is something we've tried to live in, we tried to assemble. Look at cities. Cities are literally perpetual motion machines. COVID was a fly caught a computer virus. Earlier they would call it a bug because it'd be a bug flew in the circuit, right? It's a hypothetical machine that runs on an infinite amount of energy. So that's humans. And then eventually, that doesn't work. That's not sustainable. Utopia is literally a made-up word. Also, it means nowhere. So will I think a technological utopia of automation will come? I actually don't think so, because first of all, we all see the world differently, and that's our greatest strength, right? So is that how we are we focused on accelerationism or slowing down the treadmills of consumption and production post-COVID?
Right.
And
so the good news in automation, when I speak about this quite a bit, is if you're doing procedural work and you have procedural workflows, that should be automated. I mean, because that, it's repetitive, work that most humans don't really enjoy doing, and it bumps them up to higher levels to where, and not everybody can do that, I know that, but at least you can spend more time analyzing, doing critical thinking, etc., being a little bit more exploratory. So I think that's really the big, benefit of the automation. Brian, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I mean, in terms of will it accelerate, I think that's pretty clear. I totally agree with RAFFAELLA on that one. It's going to accelerate, it's going to drive innovation. How far should it go? I think, there's two trains of thought on that, in my opinion. First of all, I think we're living in the utopia from 100 years ago. We have electricity, we have water, we have things, life is getting better. And David Deutsch, the physicist, put out this book called The Beginning of Infinity on how we use tools in order to shape our environment. And we have to get over this notion that the environment provides everything, because it doesn't. We have to build these things. And so I think we need to continue to build stuff. I think we need to continue to come up with ways to reduce the burden and reduce, threats to our own lives. Like people who are anti-technology seem to have this romantic notion that they could live out in the Great Rift Valley naked, and they're not going to be able to do that. So I say bring on the robots, but of course, a statement I made earlier about meaningful work and a meaningful day is an important part of having a civilization. And I think that we could have severe disruptions to our civilization if everybody turns into the world that you see in WALL-E, where nobody has a meaningful day. And I think that we need to find a balance. And I don't know if we'll ever get to that point where nobody has to have a meaningful day, but I sure hope we don't. But there'll probably be pivots where we can make choices about that. And I know where I stand on those.
Great. So I wanted to leave Molly about 5. What we have about 5
Which
minutes.
Molly? There are like 7 of them now.
The real Molly Lavick.
Please stand up.
Right.
Brian Molly.
You're monitoring the questions.
Real Molly,
right?
prove yourself.
Real Molly
will be back shortly. We were doing some behind the scenes things. She's coming.
Sounds like
right
collusion.
Okay.
Only
Well, I kicked
answer
off
to.
while we're waiting for the real Molly.
Yeah.
Where are you hiding? What are you hiding from?
Steve, did you see that there's a question in the?
I have this question from Gunnar Newquist. Eventually, I'll just read it. Eventually, does all of this lead to a version of Inception where all the immersive technologies are using AI to best direct us into whatever mindset the corporation putting out the tech wants? Good. Yeah, I mean, I would say yes. What are your thoughts, RAFFAELLA?
I mean, if I remember Inception correctly, it was a little bit more complicated than that. So I am not going to say that it's going to be a next Inception. I just think it's just the next evolution of digital.
Yeah, it is. It is. Brian?
The consolidation of power comes through technology frequently, but that power usually gets broken. So, there's a period in our history going on right now where people have consolidated power using technology, and at the time where they felt like it was becoming exclusive, it's being cracked. So, the Arduino, for instance, is an interesting example of how people can, in their homes, make their own technology. So, yeah, you're going to have large groups of people who are going to normalize to the normative push, but there will always be the fringe. This is how humans work, and that's how we evolve. So I wouldn't get too worried about one massive corporate takeover. I think
right.
No, just an oligarchy, not a monarchy.
Well,
that's right.
You think in terms of dynamical systems, like they just create error. I mean, like the big problem with quantum computing right now is that it's this very fragile, very complicated system, and a single photon can come in and destroy your entire compute. Right, so like that's always true of large dynamical systems.
Exactly.
No, I'm sorry. I could answer.
Is the real Molly back? Did you want to? Are there any other questions that you picked up along the way, Molly, besides the one I saw in the Q&A?
To add to the Q&A
Go ahead, Emily, while we're waiting.
Yeah, sorry, I interrupted just to say something that rhymes, but we see semantics. Yeah, I think that's a great question because, well, if someone can't override the function of something that they're using to augment themselves, perhaps they can't be able, well, there could be code, going into them. They can't override the code and control their executive functions or something if they have an atypical. But it has promise to help people too. Strokes or Bell's policy. It's just double-edged sword.
Okay, so I think there's not any questions. So I do have one more question. It's the final question I used last year as well. If you're, are people familiar with the Japanese concept of meaning called ikigai, reason for being? So this is where you have, what you love to do, your passion, your mission, profession, vocation, what your paid role is, et cetera, et cetera. So my closing question to the panelists, are you practicing a version of ikigai now, or is it something that you're aspiring to do? Who wants to go first?
I think my answer last year was that I was certainly aspiring towards that, and that maybe where we were at is because it's still a nascent type of technology. It's that maybe the resources were not at par with something that's already been around for a long time, so they're bigger. There are more resources available. I think we're a little bit closer this year. I think the space has gone up one step. So it's evolving. It's evolving.
So you're on the right critical path then. Great. Emily, how about you? Are you in that groove of ikigai, reason for being? Are you starting to, are you on the right critical path?
I'm here. That is one point. That I am on the path. It's hard though to get heard out there as someone they'll be like, we want new ideas. that involves new people. So like the fact that I'm here right now, y'all are amazingly brilliant, smart people, all y'all. And then Steve sees this, takes a chance, and he's, you know, but it's all about, if you want new thinking, you have to bring in new people and listen to their thoughts.
Absolutely,
So,
that's for sure.
Listen
for
to
sure.
me out there.
I mean, yes, new people. I'm a practitioner of high degree of heterogeneity in my network, for sure. Brian, you get the last word.
I've long ago resigned myself to the fact that I'm never going to make it to the glorious future I dreamed about. You know, I thought life would be magical once I got my undergraduate degree, and then when I got my graduate degree, and then when I raised my first million, and when I did all this, like, I've taken my thinking back to my actions. I very much enjoy building weird stuff and interacting with people and solving problems that are very hard and cause me lots of frustration and anger. So I very much enjoy that. I used to think that I was going to hit some place where I feel empowered and no longer feel like I have to do more. Not going to happen. So maybe if you think of it more as Ikigai is more along a path, then probably, as Raffaella was saying, but as a destination, it's never coming.
Right.
You know,
Right.
I've given up on that.
Right. But it's a good aspirational motivation for some.
Yeah.
Like
Tomorrow's going to be great, right? You know. But
yes, exactly.
Tomorrow, like, this is bad, but tomorrow's going to be even better. You know.
Right.
Tomorrow's
Well,
the
I think
future.
it's a wrap for us. I really want to thank the panels for an excellent discussion.